Hello, everybody. Welcome to the Countless Vlogcast. My guest today is artist A Skeleton. Can't wait to have her on, guys. I'll have her bring her on and introduce herself and learn about her art and her life as an artist. And enjoy the show, guys. How you doing?
I'm good. How are you?
So tell us a little about yourself and your artwork.
So my name is Taylor Hoy. I make art under the name A Skeleton. I'm from Hiram, Georgia, but I actually operate and travel throughout the entire metro area and the city. As an artist, I would describe myself as dark, passionate, and multifaceted. I've always had a lifelong thing for all the dark and horror and macabre, and it's a common theme throughout my portfolio as well.
Okay, so what inspires your art?
I didn't hear you. I'm sorry.
What inspires your artwork?
So I'm heavily inspired by human anatomy, and my family. My grandparents were both professional artists, and I've actually studied through a lot of their heirlooms and things. I have a very old anatomy book with a lot of the works from Michelangelo and Leonardo da Vinci, and that is kind of what started A Skeleton, was learning my love for that. But I'm also heavily inspired by language, especially the Latin language. Most of my ideas and concepts start with a word or a phrase and then kind of develop from there. So I also take a lot of inspiration from music lyrics and things like that.
So what are some of your favorite creations as an artist that you created?
So my first favorite one is called In Bloom. I did get the title from the Nirvana song, but I created this piece back in 2010, 2011. And that is it right here. Let me get the glare off the screen if I can.
So describe that a little bit for the audience.
Describe it a little bit.
Yeah.
So it's one of my first drawings that I incorporated floral with the bones and the skeletons and stuff. It's all graphite, and I really consider that to be the piece that started A Skeleton. It was one of my first very detailed pieces like that.
So in terms of like your audience and like people you want to like see art and be inspired by art, who would you say is your audience?
My audience is definitely fellow art lovers and collectors. Let's see, most of them are in the millennial age range. Very similar to people like me, but I try to be completely gender inclusive with that. But let's see. Also, fellow creative professionals. I do work a lot and partner a lot with musicians and photographers and authors. So a lot of them are my target audience.
Great. So how do you feel you've grown since you started doing the artwork and like your drawings and your work?
My work has definitely become more refined and personal. I have managed to build a pretty solid brand that works well within my niche, and it speaks to me and a lot of other people. But I've also branched out into more merchandise. I sell a lot online, and I've done more live shows as well.
Okay. So like during this pandemic, how has it affected your creativity?
So as far as it's affected my creativity, I've had a lot more time, but like the mental weight of the stress of everything going on in the world, not just the pandemic, it makes it very hard to be clear-headed and super positive and passionate. So I've had to focus more on perseverance, positivity, and self-discipline to keep creating.
So when you're inspired, how much art do you usually do when you're like inspired though? Is like you have like a limit, or is like a certain amount of art you do per day when you're inspired?
I will do as much as I can. And I do kind of work like that. I work in cycles. So I produce a lot, several pieces in a day sometimes. And sometimes I'll take a break for a week and try to share other content. But when I'm in the zone, I produce quite a bit.
Okay. So have you collaborated with other artists in your same kind of genre?
I actually haven't done a whole lot of other collaborations with visual artists, but that's definitely on my to-do list this year. But I do collaborate more with musicians and photographers. I've done quite a bit of cover artwork for a lot of musicians and a lot of small SoundCloud guys, things like that.
Okay, that's cool. So how do you use like your platform, social media, to like get your art out there and to connect with other people?
Yeah. So I like to share different aspects of what I do and, my daily life. I definitely like to focus on creating a nice skeleton community, because my community is the reason for what I do. I love sharing with you guys. I love sharing with everybody, and I like to give an inside peek. And I do like to touch on important social issues as well, but it's mainly building an audience and having a nice platform to talk about art.
That's great. So, what are some of your present goals in terms of your artwork and just maybe like growing as an artist and like other pieces you want to work on presently?
Yeah, I have a lot of stuff I want to do. I definitely one of my longer term goals is to create a showcase. So put together a local artist showcase. But I want to expand my merchandise more, and get into other mediums. Gouache is one that I want to try, and let's see. I'd also love to start working with more other visual artists. Like I said, that's on my to-do list, so it's a goal. But and then creating bigger art. I do a lot of smaller pieces, and I usually get prints. But I would love to start working with huge canvases and making big things.
So like murals and all that stuff like that.
Yeah, I would. I've done a couple murals, not professionally, but they're fun. But that would be on a larger scale that I want to do for sure.
It's like an artist dream right there. Like the murals, like to do that like big, and everybody sees it in the public. That's like one of the big artist goals,
Exactly, especially living in Atlanta.
Yeah, of course.
For sure.
So, what makes you unique in your art compared to other artists?
So, what makes me unique compared to other artists is my style is very strong. You can look at a piece in my portfolio or through my feed, and if you've seen me before, you're like, okay, yeah, that's her. That's a skeleton. But I've spent over 10 years working on my processes and my skill set. So I'm pretty well versed in multiple art forms. I work with a wide range of media, and I've actually been making jewelry and handcrafting things for several years as well. But I also do digital and traditional, so we're not limited on that. And I do have a heavy background in the cosmetology field, so that's where I get my color theory education from.
So, what inspires like you to when you're like in a funk or like you want to get out of funk? What inspires you to like get out of that and be more creative?
So getting out of a funk all the times, the last thing I want to do is step away from it, but the best thing that helps is stepping away from it. Or if I'm in a funk, I'm taking it too seriously. So doing some different exercises or just drawing something with no intent for it will get me out of a funk as well. Or listening to watching something funny. Just getting in a different mood, get out of that headspace and get into a new headspace.
That's great. So, you have any advice for like artists out there, younger artists that are starting out?
Absolutely. Take people's advice, constructive criticism to take it, but take it with a grain of salt. Don't create for other people. I actually saw something on one of the art groups the other day that said, if I were to be 13 years old, just starting out as an artist, with all of this at my fingertips, I probably wouldn't still be doing it today because it can really get to you. But as long as you create for yourself, mostly, you'll go far.
So to like add to that, so what do you tell somebody that wants validation from like likes and like comments and social media, like validation?
Make it your best work that you're putting out there, and have a specific goal in mind. Don't just be like, hey, any feedback on this would be welcome because I'm not sure if I like it. Maybe you could narrow it down more, specify, is this realistic enough? Or do you like the colors I used? How about my composition? Do you guys like the concept? Things like that. Just narrow it down and don't seem too desperate either.
Okay, so where can people find your work at? Do you have a website or are you mostly on social media?
I'm on social media a lot, but I do have a website. It's askeleton.net. That's where I sell a lot of my stickers and prints, and I am planning on starting a blog soon as well, which is another goal of mine. And that blog will consist of like the meanings behind my artwork and stuff, and more than just a peek like social media.
Okay, great. So what are you currently working on now in terms of your art? Like any like big projects or?
So right now, the project I'm working on is actually a podcast with a fellow artist named Emily Kopp. We're working on building that from the ground up. It's called Art Inspired Conversation. So I'm trying to make some visual pieces for that. We're doing different exercises for each artist, like blind contour, limiting your color palette, things like that. But other than that, I'm working on some other commissions and personal projects, but I'm redrawing a Marilyn Manson portrait that's pretty popular right now. So
Great. So I like to end these with a positive message from you. Anything you'd like to add and say to the audience out there?
thank you so much for watching, and thank you for having me on. If y'all want to check me out and support me, that would be awesome. I'd be happy to have you.
Okay, thank you for coming on, A Skeleton. I appreciate you coming on. So,
Thank you, countless.
and make sure you guys go support her and their art and their podcast coming up too, guys. You know, artists have to make a living too. So yeah. All right, thank you guys for watching episode 27, the Countless Vlogcast. My guest, A Skeleton. I'm out. Thank you guys.
Thank you, guys.